is at its lowest level in 18 years, and that number is rapidly going up, on top of which we just received and won from Congress Choice, where veterans can go out and see a doctor if they can't get service, the service that they deserve. Unemployment for disabled Americans has hit a record low, lowest in history. More than 3.5 million Americans have been lifted off food stamps, something that you haven't seen in decades. 3.5 million Americans have been lifted off food stamps. That's because they were able to go out and get a job, and they're going to love their jobs. 95% of American manufacturers are optimistic about their company's outlook, and that's the highest level also in history, and that's an old survey, been around a long time. Manufacturing wages are expected to rise at the fastest rate in over 17 years. Business and consumer confidence has reached historic highs. So far this year, American exports are up nearly 20%. I've only been here a little more than a year and a half. Over the same period in the year before I took office, we've become a net exporter of natural gas for the first time since 1957. We've gotten rid of tremendous amounts of regulations, which allows us to do things. And we still have tremendous regulations on clean air, clean water, the environment. It's very important to me, very important to everybody. But we had unnecessary regulations that were hurting our economy and hurting our country. We have eliminated a record number of job-killing regulations. And with the help of Republicans in Congress, we passed, without one Democrat vote, the biggest tax cuts and reform in our history. And as you know, the Democrats want to end that and raise everybody's taxes. That will be a disaster for our economy. As a result, more than 6 million Americans are now enjoying new bonuses, better jobs, and far bigger paychecks. Yet every single Democrat voted against the tax cuts, every single one. We didn't get one vote. They voted against working families. They voted against small businesses. Not good. In the first 3 months after tax cuts, over $300 billion poured back into the United States from overseas. We think it's going to be, in the end, when completed, over $4 trillion will be back into our country. Apple alone is bringing in $230 billion, and they're building new plants. They're building a magnificent campus. They're going to be spending their money very wisely, but they're spending it in our country, not in some other country. That was made possible by the new tax cut and reform plan. At the same time, we are finally cracking down on decades of abusive foreign trade practice. We were abused by companies. We were abused by the companies within countries. But in particular, we were abused by countries themselves, including allies. Abused like no nation has ever been abused on trade before, because we had nobody watching. They stole our jobs, and they plundered our wealth. But that ended. Yesterday, I was at Granite City Steel in Illinois. It was an incredible sight. We had an audience of steel workers, some of the roughest, toughest people you've ever seen. And half of them had tears coming down their face. I don't know if these people ever cried before in their life, to be honest. Half of them had tears coming down because we opened a tremendous United States steel plant. They're opening up 7 other plants, and the steel industry is back. They're open for business, and we need the steel industry. And the tariffs did it. And nobody mentions the fact that these plants are creating tremendous numbers of jobs, tremendous. And billions of dollars are pouring into the United States coffers, billions of dollars. But we're getting jobs, we're getting money coming in, we're respected, And eventually the steel prices will really start to go down because all of these new plants are going to be competing against each other. But we won't have foreign countries dumping, that's the word they use, dumping, steel all over the place and destroying our factories, destroying our plants, destroying our companies, and destroying our jobs. Since I was elected, we've added 400,000 new manufacturing jobs. Remember, that was the obsolete deal. Obsolete. I used to say, why is it obsolete? We have to make things. Manufacturing jobs are among our best jobs, and we're just getting started. We've also liberated millions of Americans from the crushing burdens of Obamacare. The cruel individual mandate penalty is gone. That's where you pay a lot of money for the privilege of not having to buy bad health care and pay for it. It's gone. Nobody thought we could get rid of it. That was the most unpopular provision by far, probably on anything, but certainly in Obamacare. And Obamacare is now on its last legs, fortunately. And through associated health plans, we're giving Americans the ability, just opened, millions of people going to be signing up, millions and millions. We're giving Americans the ability to join together to purchase much better and more affordable health care and health insurance, including bidding across state lines. So all of the insurance companies are going wild. They want to get it. You're going to have great health care at a much lower price. It will cost the United States nothing. Nothing. Think of that. It will cost us nothing. And that's Secretary Acosta. Secretary Azar is coming out with another health care plan, somewhat different. Result the same, much less expensive health care at a much lower price. Will cost our country nothing. We're finally taking care of our people. Finally, there's another matter that's of profound importance to me, and I wish to discuss it right now before we leave, because there's nothing like what we've been working on, so important for the lives of not only Americans, but lives all over the world. At this moment, a plane is carrying the remains of some great fallen heroes from America, back from the Korean War. They're coming back to the United States. Mike Pence, our wonderful Vice President, will be there to greet the families and the remains. And I want to thank Chairman Kim for keeping his word. We have many others coming, but I want to thank Chairman Kim in front of the media for fulfilling a promise that he made to me, and I'm sure that he will continue to fulfill that promise as they search and search and search. These incredible American heroes will soon lay at rest on sacred American soil. Even during the campaign, people would come up to me. It's a long time ago, many decades ago. Oftentimes they were older. In some cases, they were younger, great-grandfathers. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father. They asked if I could do something about it. I'd look at them and say, we don't get along too well with that country. They said, whatever you could do. And it's something that was very important to me. Many people have asked that. I've asked the Vice President and others to just pay a special tribute, and they will do that. So we honor the sacred memory of every incredible American patriot who fought and died in that war. In everything we do and every action we take, we are fighting for loyal, hardworking, patriotic citizens of our blessed nation. We're making our country great again. We're respected again all over the world. Our military will soon be stronger than it's ever been by far. That in itself will produce thousands and thousands of jobs. Nobody makes equipment like we do. Nobody. Whether it's planes or missiles or any form of military equipment. We make the best in the world by far. We're making it possible for our allies to buy that equipment quickly, where they don't have to wait for 2-year approvals and more. We're doing great, and I'm very honored to see that 4.1 number. Perhaps I'm even more honored to see that deficit shrink, the trade deficit shrink so much. With that, I'd like to ask Kevin Hassett, Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and my very good friend, Larry Kudlow, if they could both step forward and say a few words. Thank you all very much. It's a great day.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for your leadership and for the faith that you put in me when you offered me this job. And thank you for standing up for our veterans. My father and my uncle both fought in the Korean War, and you just can't imagine how much it means to those veterans that you didn't forget their comrades. You know, as an economist, it's my duty, sir, to remind that we should not make too much of one number, right? How often do we hear economists say that? But when I think back to the first time I met with you in the Oval, and we talked about your vision about how to make America great again, you might recall that in the end, I agreed, yeah, that stuff really ought to work. And the fact is that if we look at the data today, that we can see the proof in the pudding, that the President's policies are working, and it's not just in the top line, but it's in the details. So the President said that if we deregulate the economy and have a tax reform, that there'll be a capital spending boom because the factories will come back to America. If you look at the data, then the factories are booming again. The President said that if we emphasize energy production here in the U.S., that we could become a dominant energy economy, even an energy exporter. Well, if you look at the data today, one of the reasons why the data are so strong is that drilling and mining activity skyrocketed in an almost unprecedented way. And finally, and this is the thing that at times, sir, you've kind of looked at me and smiled about whether I really agree with you, you said that you would bring the trade deficit down. And you have. The $50 billion reduction in the trade deficit proves that if you stand up for America's workers and let our allies know that deals that aren't reciprocal are unacceptable, then you can make a lot of progress. And so thank you very much for your leadership, sir, and for your faith in me.
Thank you, Kevin. Great job. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It's a little warm out here, so I'll be as quick as I can. I want to reiterate what the President said, and my pal Kevin Hassett. Look, we've had a pro-growth agenda. It has been in place for a short while. It is already beginning to work. Low tax rates, rollback of regulations, unleashing energy and trade reform to fix a broken world trading system. I just want to note in the numbers, and this is becoming a trend, business investment is booming. 9 to 10% growth in the first half of this year. I believe that's going to continue. Why do I talk about business investment? Well, that's the key to productivity, which is the key to growth, which is the key to rising real wages and very strong jobs, a point that Kevin and I made during the campaign 1,000,000 times, and we continue to make it. These tax cuts, particularly on the business and investment side, are going to be boosting wages, livelihoods, and jobs for middle American, ordinary working folks. And it's starting to take effect, and that's why I agree with the President. This is a boom that will be sustainable. Frankly, as far as the eye can see, this is no one-shot effort. So that's me. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Well, that was something. Big victory lap at the White House, and for good reason. The President's selling his economic policies in a big way, calling that GDP number amazing, saying each point on GDP means $3 trillion and 10 million jobs. Sandra, a lot to talk about today on that.
A word he used a lot, sustainable. And then you heard his economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, reiterate that this is sustainable. And the President is forecasting that we are going to go a lot higher than these numbers. And 4.1% growth is already up there.
We'll take it, right? Best number in 4 years. We've got America's A-Team lined up now. Mike Warren, senior writer, Weekly Standard. How you doing, Mike?
I'm great, thanks.
The Juan Williams. There he is. Welcome back, sir.
Good Friday morning.
Charlie Hurt, opinion editor, Washington Times, and a Fox News contributor. Gentlemen, here we go.
Good to be with you.
Okay, well, Charlie, what did you think? The White House certainly taking a victory lap there.
Shocking to see the president taking a victory lap over the GDP number.
Did he earn it?
Yeah, he earned it, but we were talking about it outside. You know, I don't know that I've ever seen any president ever hold a press conference over a GDP number. And you were pointing out that obviously Obama didn't have the opportunity, but even before that, I don't know of a United States president who ever held a press conference about this. But what's so smart about it is he did boil it down because he knows that percentage points don't really matter to people. What matters is 1 point equals $3 trillion and 10 million jobs. And when voters hear that, while they may not, know that much about percentage points, they know what that means.
Well, he's talking about it because it's the best story he has right now. I mean, 4.1% is really, really good. There's a lot of other problems and issues that the administration and the president is facing. This is a great story for him to talk about. I was interested as well in the terminology of sustainability that they kept insisting, because I think that's predicting some of the criticism that they may be getting from some outside economic analysts who say this is a boost from good tax cuts, but that it may not be sustainable. So they're trying to really, I think, push back against.
And the pre-tariff positioning, that there was some buying that was rushed in here that could have bumped up the number and led to maybe a one-off sort of situation. But the White House clearly is trying to say that's not the case, Juan.
Well, all of this is really midterm election positioning.
No question.
And what you've seen in the last week is the president go out to Illinois, to Iowa, to try to say to people who are being impacted by the tariffs you mentioned, Sandra, hold on, we know we have some problems here. We're going to obviously offer you some subsidies to the farmers and the like, but my policies, my aggressive trade policies are going to pay off. And this morning, I don't know if I would agree with Charlie that it's well deserved. Obviously, he thinks that it's all about Donald Trump, this economic boon. I think we've had as you heard from the president himself, the longest sustained number of months of growth in the history of the country. So I think a lot of people deserve credit, including President Obama. But let's put that aside for a second. The growth has continued under President Trump, and he deserves credit for that.
I think it's one of the most underreported stories in the country right now. This midterm election is well underway.
Correct.
And Charlie, you look at the spots that he has picked to go out and speak this week in Kansas City, in Dubuque, Iowa, in southwestern Illinois, Tampa on Tuesday. They all have really tight election races in all these districts.
Yeah, and the economy is the thing that will determine every single one of them. And if it's rolling, if it's good, if it's positive, Trump and Republicans are going to do very, very well. If there are problems, they're not going to do very well. But one thing about the concerns about the escalating trade war, the way I see it, either way, it's good news for the Trump team, because either those concerns are baked into the current number, or as we go forward, and this trade war is not realized, because I don't think that they realize. I think deep down the White House doesn't want to escalate this, and if they don't, then you really could see that number sustained and perhaps even go higher.
Something else that was sort of unusual from this White House was talking about interest rates. The president sort of, said he was a little bit concerned about the rising interest rate environment. That's going to come into play if you continue to see the stock market rise, this sort of GDP growth. The Fed might keep hiking. Yeah,
and that should concern the White House. I mean, that could really hurt.
It could be concerning the markets. We're not getting much of a rally on this strong number.
Right. So, and I think that goes to the sense that this is baked in a little bit from the tax cuts, and also sort of, as you were saying, Sandra, before these tariffs come in. I think politically, it's interesting that the president's going to these places where I think his base is, right? And so he seems to be approaching this as a base turnout election. It'd be interesting to know what would happen if
I would take issue with that.
Yeah.
I don't think this is necessarily where his base is. I think this is where you find the toss-up battles for control of the House in November.
See, I disagree. I think it's in suburban districts.
Iowa number 1, Illinois number 12. These are Kansas 2, Kansas 3. These are very close elections right now.
Right, but you also have close elections in, say, the suburbs of Pittsburgh, some of the suburbs of Southern California. These are elections that, these are districts that Hillary Clinton won and Republicans control. That's, I think, a tough place for the president to go to. I think that's why you go to more of the sort of industrial Midwest states and districts rather than the suburban districts, which might get hurt from a tariff, a trade war that raises prices on consumers. as well as I think the president has a problem and the Republican Party has a problem with suburban women. I'd just be interested to see what if they tried to actually take the fight to some of those districts.
Larry Kudlow's coming up. We'll ask him about this, but he met with concerned GOP lawmakers yesterday who walked into the room and said, what is your long-term trade strategy? They brought the concerns of their constituents in the room. I don't know that they got a lot of answers.
There is no answer that's apparent to anyone. I mean, for me, what I do is I read, Weekly Standard. What I do is I read the Wall Street Journal. And, I mean, you can see that conservatives, Sandra, are free trade people. And they are somewhat puzzled by what's going on with this president and free trade. And the question is, where's the payoff? Even this week, in his meeting with the leader of the EU's market, he said, I came out with a deal. But we don't know exactly the dimensions of that deal. What we know is that the president says everything will work out. It seems as if, to come back to your point, Bill, what he's doing running up to the midterms is saying, you know what, I'm not going to aggressively engage in a trade war right now. I'm going to slow that down. He's getting negative signals from the Republicans on Capitol Hill. Secondly, I'm not going to have Vladimir Putin in here before the midterm election.
Well, that could all just be part of his strategy, too, Charlie.
Yeah, and you're talking about a president who, unlike previous presidents in either party, has a long-term strategy, I believe, in terms of, and that's why, he brings up these things like the tariffs. And he likes to point out that he's convinced even Larry Kudlow that using tariffs as a tool is a very effective way to get countries to do what you want to do. And of course, let's not forget, Donald Trump did run a campaign on the notion that we're already at a trade war, at least with China, and have been for they've been at a war with us for a long time and taking advantage of us. And that was a very effective thing for him. But I do think that Bill, he's clearly going for those middle voters, whether it's a base election or whatever. He's clearly going for those middle-of-the-road voters. When he talks about African-American unemployment is at its lowest ever, he is desperately trying to appeal to those voters. And when he talks about 3.5 million people are now off of food stamps and in jobs I know that they love, that he's clearly going for non-traditional
Here are the bullet points. I mean, he just said them.
Yeah.
African-American unemployment record lows. We've eliminated regulations. Business community loves that. They've been strangled for 8 years. Tax reform passed. No Democrat voted for it. You talked about the political implications here. And the Obamacare penalty is gone.
He never lets that one go without mentioning no Democrat.
But here's but he wanted that package, Charlie, to be the #1 issue that the party was running on in the midterms, tax cuts, and the benefits of those tax cuts for the American worker. Instead, what we see is that it hasn't played out. It's been a dud in terms of
hasn't played out?
In other words, has the tax cut resulted in wage hikes for American workers? Has it resulted in increased capital investment by American corporations? Has it resulted in...
How can you look at that number and not make the argument that it
You
has?
called it a dud.
It is a dud. Because I think
it's a talking point. But it's,
no, I'm not trying. I'm just saying, if you look at the polls, over half of American workers say, we haven't seen any change in our wages as a result of this tax cut.
Okay, so that was what Larry Kudlow just ended with, though, didn't he? He made the point that the president did about business investment, and that is his goal, talking to the president about his strategy and getting those wages back up. So,
so that would be good news if you see business investment. That's why he's going after Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve. And nobody's ever heard, you're talking about it, nobody's ever seen a press conference. Nobody's ever heard the president attack the chair of the Federal Reserve.
But this is the concern, the investment, the possibility that investment could be curbed, again, if trade actions cause these companies to sort of pull back. You're hearing that from former Trump administration.
From his lips to your ears, the economic envy of the entire world.
That's true.
The United States. Mike, hang on. Juan, hang on. Charlie, see you in a moment, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, we're going to have much more on today's Big